Are you curious about Gestalt language processing? You are not alone. Join me, Corinne Smoose, and speech therapy PD for our podcast, The Gestalt Get Together. Our episodes try to balance the enthusiasm and excitement about GLP and its associated intervention ideas, as well as a healthy dose of skepticism about how to understand and integrate this paradigm shift into your career and the field at large. We hope that you can get together with us to learn more about Gestalts.
Welcome to Brainstorms, Functional Neuro Rehab for SLPs, presented by SpeechTherapyPD.com. This podcast is designed for the adult medical speech-language pathologist. Most of our audience members work in settings such as acute care hospitals, private practice, outpatient hospital clinics, and inpatient rehabilitation hospitals. Each episode has an accompanying audio course on SpeechTherapyPD.com and is available for 0.1 ASHA CEUs. The content of this course is based on the research and experience of the presenters. The listener is responsible for researching to determine if the information and skills taught are appropriate for their clients, students, or patients. SpeechTherapyPD.com does not necessarily endorse, recommend, or favor the information shared, nor any of the claims, opinions, statements, offers, or services made by the presenter. We welcome our guest, Hillary Cooper. Hillary started her career in speech-language pathology at an outpatient private practice in Leesville, Louisiana, which served active duty soldiers, their dependents, and military retirees. The wide range of experience she gained in that position served her well when she moved to Ruston to marry her soulmate. She has since worked in long-term care facilities, acute care, and home health. In 2016, Hillary decided that she wanted to change the status quo of dysphagia treatment in North Louisiana. So she started her outpatient private practice and then created North Louisiana Swallow Solutions in 2017 to be the premier mobile fees provider in the region. In 2019, Hillary co-founded the Dysphagia Outreach Project, a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to provide meaningful assistance to individuals affected by dysphagia. In 2021, Hillary joined the Louisiana Speech Language Hearing Association Board of Directors and is the current immediate past president. Hillary is the 2024 to 26 treasurer for the Council of State Association Presidents. She's also pursuing her EDD in Learning and Organizational Change at Baylor University. Hillary enjoys teaching and traveling around the country in her free time, providing high-quality lectures to medical speech language pathologists. Whew, that's a mouthful.
Long-winded.
So welcome, Hillary. It's great to see you.
Good to see you too. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, Hillary and I know each other from some state leadership things and conferences and stuff. So it's exciting to have you on to talk about this tonight because I've actually seen you present on this topic before. And that's, really the reason that I felt like it was so important for you to share your knowledge. It's a wealth of information, really, truly. So I appreciate you being so willing and forthcoming to share not only your verbal knowledge, but your resources as well. So we'll have some resources uploaded to the show notes after the course this evening for those of you that are joining us.
And trust me, there is a pile of resources. We didn't slack on that for you today.
No, that's good. So let's kind of jump in because I know this is kind of passion project and a passion talk for you. And so
absolutely.
I think talking about just, sparking the knowledge piece for people who have considered starting their own nonprofit, as SLPs and audiologists, we all have this kind of need and drive to help people. And so kind of learning more about what that looks like and how it could be less overwhelming, I think is a great place to start.
I think the best place to start is to acknowledge that we are a helping field, but we also want to make sure that we are helping in a productive way. And there are lots and lots of different ways, ranging from, single time community involvement kind of advocacy efforts, all the way through nonprofit foundation or joining nonprofits as a volunteer, as a board member, and then even through state association, SLP state association membership or board membership, and even beyond that to CSAP, to ASHA at the national level. There's lots of different opportunities out there. So I think, the first thing that I recommend if someone says, man, I really want to get out there and do some advocacy, I tell people to kind of figure out how much advocacy do you want to do? Because it's a slippery slope. I kind of joke, it's like tattoos. Some people like you get one tattoo and then you have like 17. For me, it's nonprofit board membership. So, I get on one and next thing you know, I'm on three. Like, how is that even a thing? But it's because that it is a passion for me. And that is something that I'm willing to give my extra time to do. But not everyone has that amount of extra time. So I think taking it back, the first thing that as a advisor to someone who's newly getting into advocacy would be to figure out like how much time do you have to give, and then what topic, what area really gets you going, because advocacy is a passion project and it is something that you don't get paid for typically. Be prepared to not get paid for it. I joke that my work with the Spage Outreach Project is a reverse income. It's like a negative income because I keep donating and things to it. So, and I spend so many hours at it that I could be working for money that it does become sort of a reverse income. But that's part of what makes me happy. And I'm fortunate and privileged enough to be able to do that. Not everyone has the ability to take away time from their work week to donate to a nonprofit as volunteer hours. So, realistically looking at your work-life balance and, what you can give, whether it's, okay, well, I want to participate with one thing locally. Maybe I want to help out with my state convention and then just be done for a bit. And then maybe think about it later and do another small thing. That's definitely an option, or you could do like I did and just jump feet first into founding your own national nonprofit. Don't recommend that.
Well,
I think that was a little crazy.
I jumped into my state association because a mentor asked me to be the secretary when I wasn't a new grad, but I was still relatively new to the field, like less than 5 years in. And yeah, it was more about giving back and realizing that the role that you may start in could be much smaller and more of a micro or kind of like a mini volunteer role.
Right.
That can grow into
100%,
something.
depending on what
grow
time
or
you
not.
have. Right.
Yeah.
And I know with various nonprofits and state associations, you can start as small as like an event volunteer or even go into a committee membership. Maybe you don't want to commit to like being a board member, but you can join a committee that meets, maybe once a month or once every couple months and, provide input on certain topics. So there's like so many ways to get involved with advocacy that aren't as time intensive as being the president of a state association or founding a nonprofit or anything like that. So I just want people to recognize that it is something that's achievable. And when everybody pitches in just a little bit here and there, really big changes can happen. So, even if you're like, oh, well, I'm not doing a lot, I'm just doing one event. Well, that makes a huge difference. If 50 people do one event, the next thing you know, that event is huge,
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a good kind of place to start with, people talking about how they pay so much for licensure for ASHA and then like for, having your state license. So yeah, why would someone want to pay more to be part of their state association? Because I think again, that's sort of a misnomer and like the mystery. Like, what's the mystery there? Why is it important?
Well, I think it's important to sort of view the national advocacy efforts as like apples and then the state advocacy efforts as oranges. So they are both fruit, they are both amazing and yummy, but they're not the same, right? So your national advocacy efforts, they're going to do things that affect all 50 states and are more global. They're not going to be coming in to advocate for your state practice act or your specific state's caseload caps or things like that. Those are things
Unless
that
you
your
need them
state
to.
association, unless you need them to, they will
Unless you,
provide support.
yeah, for
They will
sure.
provide support to the state association to do it in the form of like knowledge. They'll provide lots of knowledge, lots of backup, connections to different people that you need to. They even provide grants. But at the state level is where sort of the boots hit the ground and you start to interact with the legislature, the lobbyists, and working on those things that we can really control at the state level via legislation, like grassroots advocacy and those types of things. So I say that, yes, it stinks that sometimes we feel like we're getting hit in all these different directions financially for membership. But as I'm so fond of saying, you get what you pay for. If you put into it, then you're going to get more out of it. So if everyone were to join the state associations would have so much more bargaining power to pay a lobbyist to go in and really advocate for our field's interests. And something that most state associations across the board are struggling with right now is membership. And without those dues coming in, it limits the state association's ability to hire a lobbyist. It limits their ability to have the day at the Capitol in various types of advocacy events because they just don't have the funding or the budget for it. And while there may be grants available, they don't cover everything most of the time. And lobbyists are expensive, y'all. They're very expensive. So there's definitely that.
And also I think, one of the conversations that came up here a couple of years ago when, we were kind of knee deep, hip deep, whatever you want to call it, in the pandemic was, do we want to continue or can we feasibly continue from a financial aspect to have a lobbyist? And I was one of the first people that was like, oh my God, seriously, because I know our lobbyists here very well that we've worked with for years now, and he's just an invaluable resource in connecting us not only to the legislators, but connecting the legislators to us when there are things that they have questions about. Because, we like to think that our lobbyists or our Congress people or House of Representatives and our state senators know all the things and stuff, but by and large, they mostly do not know what we do unless they've had a personal experience. And so
this actually just came up. This exact thing just came up in Louisiana. So this is the first year we've had a lobbyist in like 10, 15 years in LASHA. So Louisiana terminated our lobbyist about a decade ago. And nobody wanted to join LASHA because they were like, what is my state association doing for me? And I thought that was a fantastic question. So we started working on getting membership increased and getting financially more sound so that we could hire a lobbyist. And we did that this year. So one of the first bills that they came back to us on just last week was a audiology bill that included the definition of audiologist as someone who completes education for speech language pathology. And we were like, wait, no, what? So they clearly just got their wires crossed, and the people who were writing the bill had no idea what the scope of practice for audiologists were, and they just assumed we were the same thing. And so our lobbyist was able to communicate with us, communicate with the audiology people, and we were able to clarify that no, we don't want to be included in this hearing aid bill that's going on right now in our legislature. Not that we're opposing it, we just don't want the definition to be wrong. And that's one of the things that if we hadn't had a lobbyist, could have just flown under the radar. And then we would have had this really poorly written piece of legislation out there that defined audiologists as speech pathologists, and our legislators wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah.
And so, those things are just worth their weight in gold as far as, having a seat at the table and being able to make those changes.
Yeah, that and hearing aid dispensers, I think for audiologists having that in our legislation in Virginia, and then also the cerumen management because for a long time, audiologists were not allowed to be a part of that, which is nuts because I don't want to pick on a dentist. I love a dentist because I've had so many dentists identify head and neck cancer in my patients that got missed other places. So I won't pick on the dentist, but like to have someone removing cerumen who doesn't really have the educational background on anatomy and what to do and how far to go. So yeah,
Or the
that's
tools to do it. Yeah.
yeah. So that was a big thing here. And then also we had something come up that got completely missed back in, I think it was 2020, in our in the governor's budget, where they took out the trauma the trauma fund in the Commonwealth of Virginia by accident. It got deleted. And so, yeah, it was a huge big deal because it deleted a lot of funding for TBI patients and continuing care and accident rates for victims and things like that. That again, we think that that's not really, how does that affect us? Well, it affects us because it affects patients' access to care and patients' continuation of care. And so, had we not had a lobbyist who brought that to our attention, again, there's so many pieces of legislation going on at any one given time that if you don't have access, like we have something called Capital Connections in Virginia that our lobbyist actually started. And it's a book, we get like a booklet that has every district, every senator, every representative for the House for Virginia, what their district, what their committees are, what they're involved in. And so that's, again, you may not want to be an advocate at the governmental legislative space or what have you, but somebody's got to be on top of it, because
Right.
if they're not, then that's how these Medicaid and Medicare funding cuts get passed. That's how we get reduced coverage for private insurance and payers, and it branches into all these other pieces that most people are not
Yes.
aware of. And
And I
so
could give so many examples. We had just this summer, the Louisiana legislature prevented a company that I'm not going to name from buying one of our Medicaid companies. And they've been known for sort of gobbling up these Medicaid companies and having really terrible reimbursement rates, to the point where they were unanimously sort of thumbs down by the Louisiana legislature. And as SLPs, we were able to say, we don't want that company. We don't want that company here, because they have really atrocious denial rates for SLP services and audiology services. So, the only way to make change is to go after it. And, that's part and parcel of, if you have the extra funds, I mean, everybody knows money is tight, but if you have the extra funds to be able to just join your state association, then those funds are advocating on your behalf. And, if your state doesn't have a lobbyist, it's probably, like, I can almost guarantee you it's because their membership is too low for them to be able to afford it. So, by you chipping in and participating, that really goes a long way. And, talking to your friends and everybody, if everybody were to sort of pitch in, then the states could get the lobbyist who can get there and be the person in between the lawmakers and the state association, and really make things happen. So we've got a pretty big agenda right now going on in Louisiana, because we haven't been at the table in a long time. And there's a lot of things that went south while we were not at the table. Our Medicaid reimbursement, y'all, it's a hot mess. And we're working on that. That's something that, we were inspired by other state associations who got lobbyists and went out and made changes. And those changes sort of trickle down. So the Medicaid reimbursement rates are increasing in multiple states across the US. And because of that, private practitioners are able to accept Medicaid. Schools get better reimbursement rates, which helps to fund hiring more SLPs, which helps with the caseload cap issue. So it's one of those things that just sort of like snowballs. And, there's so many different ways at the state level to support their primary goal, which is to really, the thing that makes state associations so amazing is their ability to lobby, right? So that's the difference between like a nonprofit like Dysphagia Outreach Project and a state association. Is Dysphagia Outreach Project, sorry, say that 5 times fast, cannot lobby, but a state association can. And that's because they're different types of nonprofits and they have different pros and cons. But with the state association, one of the things that they can do, because most state associations are 501c6 organizations, and what that means is that up to 49% of their activities financially can go towards lobbying. What? So 49%. So if our state associations are funded enough and if they're efficient enough with their funds, they can use 49% of it to go to pay for a lobbyist. And that's huge. Like Dysphagia Outreach Project, there's lots of things that I would love to say that, we would advocate for, but 501c3s, which is what Dysphagia Outreach Project is, are forbidden, like completely forbidden from doing any lobbying whatsoever. Like we can't even hint that we want to do it. I can talk about how we can't, but we can't even brush on that edge of like participating in lobbying, because you will lose your 501c3 status so fast. But one of the things about state associations is that you can. So if your state association is not, it's probably a financial reason, and it's probably due to lack of membership. And, having an engaged volunteer base is a huge part of, engaging the membership. So if you're sitting there going, oh, my state association doesn't have a lobbyist and they're not very active. Maybe that's a sign that you should email them and see if there's anything they need help with. And that's kind of how I got involved with the state association level. Is I was at a conference and I was speaking and I was looking around and there was like maybe 2 or 3 talks on the medical SLP topic. And I was like, man, I wish there was more medical SLP stuff. And so I went and started talking to them. And next thing you know, I'm on a committee helping to like wrangle up all my med SLP friends to come and submit and talk. And then the very next year, we had an entire full track for medical SLPs. So like, never underestimate the impact that one person's contribution can make. Like, one volunteer, like saying, hey, let's do an ad hoc committee on med SLP issues, and let's have an entire track at the conference on that. And it worked. And it's been pretty consistently representative of med and school-based SLPs and audiologists over the last several years. So it's definitely worthwhile. It's worth your time. It's a good investment.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, kind of circling back to, there's a couple things I want to circle back to it. One is supporting advocacy at the state and local levels, because, we mentioned membership, we mentioned how dues are utilized, and we mentioned lobbying. But again, what are some really simple ways that we can support advocacy at state and local levels beyond those couple of things?
Oh my gosh, there's so many ways. So, one of the things I own a mobile fees business, and I'm going out and I visit nursing homes, long-term acute care, inpatient rehabs across North Louisiana. And every time I set foot in one of those buildings, I'm an advocate. Whether it's, me providing education to a doctor about the overutilization of feeding tubes, or whether it's, talking to my facility SLPs about the goings on of the state association that I'm part of. So that's one easy way to do. If you're already at work, you can advocate so easily just by talking to people about what we do. Because I will tell you, so many doctors have come to me and said, I had no idea that SLPs did that. And I think it's because we put our blinders on and we're kind of shy sometimes, or we're afraid to like, oh, what if the doctor doesn't like me? And, all of that stuff. And really, we just have to show them how awesome our field is, like all the really cool things that we can do and how we can really be a vital part of our interprofessional care team. So that's the easiest way. You can talk to your administration, right? So educate those decision makers, the people who are making the decisions. So if you're at a school and you're feeling like your caseload is just beyond manageable, well, they're not going to know unless you educate them about why is our caseload so unmanageable. So like that's the easiest thing. It's getting out and just explaining the why of what we do and how we do it and what it all involves. So like, I don't know that a lot of administrators realize how much paperwork goes into an IEP and how much paperwork goes into all the billing and things that we have to do on the school-based side, just to maintain our caseloads. And that's not including all of the scheduling, treatments, and appointments, and this and that, makeups, and everything that's involved. So let's get out there and advocate and educate them on what it involves. There's lots of different community events. I know my area, even though North Louisiana is very rural, almost every parish, because we have parishes, not counties, has some sort of senior fair. They have children's health fairs. So, get a booth for your organization. If you're in a school district, see if you can talk them into letting you get a booth. And if you have a private practice, then get a booth and advocate and let people know what we do. You can raise awareness that way. And again, I think we're a really misunderstood profession. And so, like, as I've gotten out there and I've talked to a lot of people in the public, they just have no clue what we do. Even in my doctorate program, it's a really diverse group of people across a wide range of professions in my doctorate program. And when I told them I was a speech pathologist, they're like, oh, you help kids talk. And I was like, oh, no. Bless those who do, but that is not me.
No, not me either.
And when I told them, like, yeah, I do fees. I stick cameras up people's noses and I watch them eat. They were like, wait, what? Y'all do that? So I think there's a lot of things that we do that is just not recognized. You can do some collaboration. So collaborate with your local neurologist to talk about how things like stroke recovery involves SLP and neurology working together. Again, education. You can do media things. You can reach out to your local media. They are suckers for feel-good stories. If you have a feel-good story, your local news wants to hear about it. And so, tell them about the wonderful things that you guys are doing. You sense a theme here?
Yeah, for sure. Because I think too, like you mentioned, the community group kind of stuff, a lot of people think that they're tied to either a support group type situation or the health system. But in my community, a lot of the churches here that are predominantly African American serving communities have these really great health fairs, education fairs, where they are talking about preventable health conditions, and they really like it when SLPs and audiologists come and speak, because they know that we have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to stroke education and the tie-in between, stroke being the three big: heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, being three preventable diseases that really contribute heavily to stroke. And so they really or that's another great community level resource. It doesn't really cost you anything. It just costs you time, but it's just so rewarding in getting that feedback from people to say, not only to say thank you, but to say, oh my gosh, I had no idea. This is great information.
Right. Yeah. Hopping in with your local community health clinic to do head and neck cancer screenings, There's so many different ways. I think that you can just get creative in whatever, going back to what we talked about in the very beginning, whatever it is that fills your cup, whatever it is that pulls you, if it's social media content creation, then find an organization that kind of you vibe with and
Mm-hmm.
offer your service to them. Because I guarantee you they're probably not going to tell you that. Like, volunteers are worth their weight in gold. And if you're passionate and you want to offer your services to someone, uh, as far as an organization, to do things like, maybe you're really passionate about fundraising for a cause and you just like doing like silent auctions and things like that. Like, there's lots of different ways you can donate your time to various organizations, whether it's your state association or, like I said, even like the local community health clinics or local nonprofits, churches. There's so many different ways to donate your time and make it in a productive way where you're providing education, you're providing a service, you're supporting the state association to be able to fund a scholarship for students, things like that. So it's just whatever it is that really, like, I can't hammer that in enough, is that if you're involved in advocacy and it's not something that really just lights you up when you talk about it, don't do it. Don't do it, because it's going to become a burden and it's not going to be fun. And it's your free time, and our free time is worth so much, right? You could be spending that time with your family. You could spend it quietly reading, like one of my favorite hobbies. You could, so many different ways you can spend your time. If you choose to give your time to an organization, let it give back to you by filling up your cup, right? And if it's not doing it, then it's okay to say, this isn't working for me. I need to find somewhere else that will fill up my cup. So if it's something like, when you're talking to someone about it, like whenever I talk about the Phage Outreach Project, I light up, because it is my passion project. If I could do it all day, every day, like for forever, I would do it all day, every day, forever. But I have to pay the bills. So I have my day job. And I'm like, nope, gotta go to work. I love my day job, don't get me wrong. But like, I love doing the advocacy work. And you should be that excited about it, or maybe it's not a good fit.
Yeah, no, and I think for me, like being on the state board for as long as I was, one of it opened up a lot of doors that I don't think I would have otherwise had in my career. But it also taught me a lot of skills, because things presented themselves that we needed to act upon, and that we had opportunities to work with ASHA to do like our strategic plan and create mission and vision statements that were updated, and then do another update in like 3 years down the road for the strategic plan. And so I would have never, because I'm not a yes person, when it comes to someone telling me what to do and being like, okay, yeah, even if I don't agree with it, because my ethical and moral compass are very strong. And so working in the health system that I was working in, for me to be a leader there, one, there's not enough money in the world for me to put up with that situation. And we'll leave that there. But the other thing was, I wasn't willing to sacrifice being able to volunteer on my terms, to be a part of things that I wanted to be a part of, again, that opened up other doors and allow me to get these skills that I may have never had, and this training that I may have never had. And I think that's a really good place to kind of jump into the difference of, because you talked about the difference between 501c3 and 501c6 kind of, briefly, but I think
Right.
kind of outlining a little bit more than just the funding of 49% being able to be used towards a lobbyist for a state organization as a 501c6. But, what are some other differences there? Because I think that's really important for people to understand, because we see sometimes that some organizations are not always following the guidelines of the nonprofit status that they've
Right.
been that they've applied for and now are saying that they are, but they're not necessarily complying with that. So I think that's a really important discussion.
Right. Yeah, so at CSAP, which also is a fantastic resource, if you do decide to join the board of a state association and become president, past president, or president-elect, you are then eligible to join CSAP. So at CSAP, we were talking about this, and I really think that a lot of people just sort of view nonprofits as sort of like, oh, that's a nonprofit. Like we hear 501c3, 501c6, and we don't really kind of understand what those mean. But there's like 40 something different types of nonprofits, and they all have different rules and they all have different guidelines. So Dysphagia Outreach Project is a 501c3 nonprofit. So that means we are a federally tax exempt organization, and your donations, when you donate dollars, you can get a tax receipt for that and deduct that from your taxes. So it's a tax deductible donation. And that's one of the best benefits of having a 501c3 is that we don't pay taxes, we're tax exempt, and when you donate to us, either skilled services or money, those count as tax deductible expenses, right? With a 501c6, your donations to the organization do not count. I mean, so it's tax exempt federally, so the organization doesn't pay taxes. But if you join a state association, it's not that it doesn't count as a tax deductible charitable donation. Now you can deduct it on your taxes as a business or a work expense, and you should deduct it as a work expense, and talk to your CPA about your specific state rules and everything about that. But you can't do it as a charitable deduction. So that's one of the biggest things, is that a lot of people sometimes are hesitant to donate, especially the big companies are hesitant to donate to 501c6 associations because they're not tax deductible. So they don't get that little tax kickback at the end of the year. Now, there are ways to get around that because it's the IRS. There's always loopholes. So if you are running a 501c6 and you have, say, a hospital group decide to sponsor the convention, they can use their advertising budget to write that off. But they don't get a charitable tax deduction, right? They can use it as part of their advertising budget or various other expense ways to do it. Most of the time I see them use advertising, and they're able to do it that way. But I think that's probably the biggest thing. So 501c3, I think Dysphagia Outreach Project versus LASHA. So Dysphagia Outreach Project, 501c3 organizations are typically not membership organizations. Now, there are some 501c3s out there who have like recurring donations yearly and they call it a membership, but it's not the same. It's not the same thing as like membership dues. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like you're not getting a benefit based on your membership.
Right. Yeah. So you're more of like a recurring donor, and they can put lipstick on it and call it various things so that you can say you're a member. But ultimately, a 501c6 is designed to be an association, right? So that's where people pay their membership dues, and the membership dues make up the majority of the income of that nonprofit. So with 501c3, so thinking Dysphagia Outreach Project, our primary income comes from donations and grants, right? So whether it's corporate donations, personal donations, or grant funding, whereas 501c6, you're looking at membership dues, revenue from events, like convention. Convention is usually, for most states, the number one revenue driver. Between convention and online CEU events, those are the two biggest revenue drivers for the states. Aside from membership dues. Membership dues are like the number one. It all goes back to that membership. So, and those are some of the differences between them. Now there's like tax like on the back end tax differences, like how you file and things like that. But ultimately, I think the biggest difference is that 501c6, like LASHA, can do lobbying. 501c3 cannot. 501c3 is fully tax deductible for your donations. 501c6 is not. And again, those are just two of the many types of nonprofits that are out there. As an SLP, you're probably not going to get involved in any of the other types of nonprofits that are out there unless you're doing stuff outside of the field. What's interesting is that when we were at CSAP, a lot of the state association presidents were like, what are we? Where are we? Are we a 501c6 or a 501c3?
Which, by the way, is supposed to be on your website.
So what's interesting is that a few of them realized they were 501c3s and they were lobbying, which is against the rules. And so by knowing the rules, they were able to like fix that. And then there's other associations that are not lobbying that can go to 501c3 status since they're not lobbying, and then they get all the benefits of being a 501c3. So with a 501c3 like Dysphagia Outreach Project, there's lots of different, and I have some of the resources in the show notes for later, but there's a lot of different things that 501c3s get for free. Like you can go to TechSoup, and there's some TechSoup is a great website where all these tech companies donate products like web products and electronics and things like that, or they give discounts, like steep nonprofit discounts, but you only qualify for those if you're a 501c3, not a 501c6. And you can get a whole bunch of different types of, grants and things. Dysphagia Outreach Project had a company give us a $500 grant for swag for our booths to give away. You can't get that as a 501c6. So there's a lot of pros and cons to it, but ultimately, it comes down to tax and compliance. And if you are doing lobbying as a 501c3, you can lose your nonprofit status permanently and possibly have to pay a fine.
Yeah.
So don't do it. It's bad. You don't want to cross the IRS. Like, in a lot of these state associations who found out that they were doing things they shouldn't, they were very fortunate that they caught it before the IRS did.
Yeah.
So.
And so to move away from the scary stuff, because I think one of the things that you and I have talked about, and one of the reasons that we really wanted to do this was thinking about, how many people out there, again, are the helping mindset that they want to open some sort of traditional nonprofit, and they just really have great ideas and maybe even a great model of what they're thinking about doing, but they really just don't know where to start. So what are some steps that, kind of initiate and get the ball rolling for that?
Oh yeah. So I've actually talked to quite a few people who've come to me for guidance in sort of how do you do it, since I co-founded Dysphagia Outreach Project from square one. So the first thing that I advise people is to remember that a nonprofit is a business, whether it's a state association or a charitable nonprofit, it is a business. So the first step, don't get ahead of myself. So the first thing you need to do is figure out what it is that you want to do and make sure that that niche isn't being filled by another organization. So if you're overlapping another organization that's in your area or within your service area, then you're just going to run into all kinds of territorial fights and things, and going after the same sponsors and duplicating services. So I wouldn't advise that. I would want to make sure that whatever it is that you choose to do is narrowed in scope, so that in regards to grants and fundraising efforts, you stand out, right? So you don't want to create another puppy rescue when there's 50 in your town, because then you're just one of many instead of. So Dysphagia Outreach Project is the only one of its kind in the US. So that was an easy thing. It was also a hard thing because nobody's ever done it before. So we had to reinvent everything. But the first step legally, once you get the mission in mind, is to incorporate. So you have to incorporate at the state level, just like you would a private practice or a business of any kind. Now, the form of your incorporation is going to depend on your state and your state rules. So in Louisiana, Dispatch Outreach Project is incorporated as an LLC. In other states, it would have been a PLLC. But really, your lawyers would be able to advise you on this, on like what format it needs to be. Most states have really good, on the Secretary of State's office, they have really great nonprofit resources at the state level to make it really easy. So Louisiana has GoBiz, which is a great portal for you to go in, and they have lots of FAQs and like, how do I get it started at the state level? So that's the first thing. When you incorporate, you're going to have at least, in most states, 3 founding members your organization. So you can't just expect like, oh, I'm going to do a nonprofit and I'm going to do it all myself. There's a reason why they require that. It's because it's too much for one person to do. So you are required to have a board when you incorporate. So you're going to want to make sure that you pick people that are as passionate as you are on your topic. Otherwise, you'll end up doing it on your own and you'll go crazy. So I was very fortunate to have co-founders who were quite as passionate as I was, and we were able to work together to get things going. So I think that's really important. So once you get your state incorporation finalized, you have to open up a bank account, the business bank account. Now, all of this, you're still not a 501c3. You're not a federal nonprofit yet. This is just to get operating. Then once you get like your business bank account, you get your board formed, you get your incorporation done at the state level, then you get to apply for your 501c3. That process, depending on the type of nonprofit and your paperwork and the money you have involved, can either be really quick or it can be really long. So there is an easy form. I forgot the number of the form, but there is a you file for it to do the short form. In my case, we were able to do that because we had limited resources to begin with and a small board, and it was very simple for us to just file it. And then within 3 months, we had our 501c3. Other times, if you have to do the long form, it can take like 18 months to get your 501c3. So in the meantime, you are not, your donations to that organization. So if you get incorporated, you have a bank account and you go out and you start hitting up all these different companies and people to donate money, it's not tax deductible yet. You're just a local, you don't have to pay business taxes, but it's not tax deductible on their stuff. Now, when you get your 501c3, it can be retroactive for 12 months. So it's a lot. So there's a high, very strong learning curve. If you started a for-profit business and you think, oh, well, I've done business, I can do this, it is apples and oranges again. So doing everything for-profit, which I did, and then going in to start a nonprofit, like you have to differently about everything. It's like the difference between doing video fluoroscopy and fees. It's similar skills, but
Right.
you're looking through a completely different lens. And so you have to kind of get your eyes straight. Like I can switch between them, but it takes me a minute to be like, oh, okay, here's my landmarks. Here's what I'm looking at when I look at a fluoro. And that's kind of how it is with nonprofit versus for-profit. Once you get your 501c3, then you're pretty good to go. You know, you've got to deal with all your the annual compliance stuff. Transparency is very important because everything is transparent when it's a nonprofit. And I think one of the biggest things is to realize that if you are a nonprofit, you don't own it. It is public. It is a public, you are on the board of it, but you don't own it. It's a different sort of feeling. And if you have volunteers, you treat your volunteers a completely different way than you would treat employees. And if you treat your volunteers like you treat employees, you will not have volunteers for very long. So it's not as intimidating as it sounds. I think, so in the show notes, I have a bunch of resources. One of the resources that I found to be completely invaluable as a place to go and ask questions and to get resources and all of that was the Nonprofit Leadership Lab. So that is a membership group where you pay a monthly fee and you have access to like a website with lots of resources, and then you have access to the Facebook group. And it's composed of literally thousands of nonprofit board members and founders. And so you go in there and you're like, I have a question about taxes. You can just pop up in the group. You can search through the threads that are on there and ask questions, or read prior questions, or you can ask a new question and there's someone there to help guide you. I found that to be a really valuable resource for myself when I was first starting. I would definitely encourage anyone who is wanting to go down this path to get a mentor. I think if you try to do it on your own, it gets really overwhelming really quick. I don't know if y'all have ever been to the IRS website, but oh my Lord. Just trying to figure out like what are the rules is hard, right? And they it feels like sometimes like the more time you spend, the more confusing it gets when you're trying to learn about all the different intricacies of nonprofit stuff. And of course, they do their best to scare the bejesus out of you. But
especially
I
if you
think,
got to pay taxes and then you're trying to figure out where to go to do that. And they're like, no, you can't go here. The pay
and then they
portal.
throw down like, there will be financial penalties and you could lose your 501c3 and, all these things. And you're like, no. So they get you really afraid to act because there's so many rules and it's such a different space than you're used to working in. At least that was my experience. Now that I've been doing it for, oh my gosh, 5 years. I can't believe it's been 5 years. With Dispatch Outreach Project, like looking back, there's definitely been ups and there have been downs, and we've come out through the other side, and I wouldn't choose to do anything else. Like if I could get paid to do it and have it be my primary income, I would do it in a heartbeat. But we're not there yet. So, but I think it's good to have a mentor. It's good to have a group of people that you can talk to about these things. Same with starting, a private practice or a mobile fees business, or, any of the business things that we do. I just really want to emphasize that just because someone has tons of experience in for-profit doesn't mean they're going to be a good mentor for you in the nonprofit world, because again, you think about everything completely differently. So the motivations that bring you to the table, that filling your cup, knowing that you're trading your time and your energy and your effort and money in some cases for this passion project, like the people you bring on board need to have that passion too, because that's how they're getting paid, is by filling their cup, by fulfilling that desire to give back, to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And if we start treating them like an employee who are trading money for things, like people are willing to do like some sketchy things for money. But when it's free, when you're like, I don't get paid, I'm not going to do that. Like you have to sort of, be a lot more gentle with your volunteers than you would with an employee.
Yeah. And I think
sure
that
if my employees hear this, they're going to be like, she's gentle with us.
but I think that's another good point. When you're thinking about the nonprofit, you gave us the concrete steps, but I think some of the behind the scenes steps, and this is something that we did as a state organization, was to kind of define roles and define what that looked like step by step, month by month. So we knew that
right.
Moving into conference, this particular person who's the state education person who basically runs the conference, these months leading up to the conference, you're going to be responsible for these things. These are the people who are your support. And you can put that as part of, if you as a nonprofit have a strategic plan, because I think that's another, we hear strategic plan and I think we think, oh, that's so scary. It's like writing the Bible, but it's really not. It's sort of your outline, almost like a business model of what you plan to do and how you plan to do it. Because when you plan to do something and we have this big grand idea, if we don't have the steps and the roles defined of who's going to be responsible for what and what that team looks like. So even if you were, say, you're on the conference committee for your state organization, that's great. You just think, oh, I'm in the conference committee. Well, what the heck does that mean? I'm going to help pick the conference site. Well, maybe, but in some states that entails contacting them. It's making sure that you again have that content across the board for the variety that you want for your membership. And so I think for a nonprofit, it's sort of the same thing. You want to have that team mentality of, okay, I'm the VP of outreach, but who do I talk to? Who's my backbone of support, or who's my kind of my homie riding next to me when
Right.
get things done, because you have to
And I
have.
also, it is so important to have that structure, but it's also important to build in flexibility into the structure, more so in the nonprofit world than in the for-profit business world. Because when you're dealing with unpaid volunteers, there's going to be times when they have to step away. And they're not going to be able to do things. So you have to build into that structure that you create with like the guidelines of who's doing what and whose role is this. You also have to think about flexibility, because when things go crazy in life, what is the first thing that goes? Your volunteer gigs, like, because that's easy to skim it off the top. It's not paying me anything, so I have to put that away. And so I recommend that. And I also recommend to make sure that you keep your team as small as possible. This is something I've found from experience. I tried to fly too close to the sun. And when you have too many fingers in the pot, things can get messy. So I think there's a balance. I haven't found it yet. Theoretically, there's a balance in nonprofits between having enough hands to get all of the things done and not having so many hands that things start to get ugly. And you start to get a lot of personality conflicts and stuff. So like finding that balance is hard. And as you're growing, that balance is constantly shifting and changing. So there's going to be mistakes. So that goes into my next point, which is if you're going into the advocacy or nonprofit world or state association world, give yourself grace. Because you're going to mess up or you're going to miss opportunities, and that's okay. That's part of the learning process. We didn't have a course in our graduate programs about advocacy. I wish we did. So like we're coming into this a lot of times blind. And when you come into any kind of professional venture blind, mistakes will happen. And that's okay. And that's why being a part of groups like CSAP, especially if you're part of your state association leadership, like the 3Ps, president, past president, or immediate past president. Anyways, 3Ps.
Yeah, we were president-elect, president, and past president for us.
There you go, the 3Ps. It is so wonderful because you can go to the conferences, you can get on the Facebook groups, and you can talk. And like how Renee and we sat next to each other at CSAP, and I left that weekend last year just with amazing like inspiration and ideas. And after talking to other leaders, I realized, there's missed opportunities that we had. You could call them mistakes or you could call them missed opportunities. But then we were able to bounce those off of each other and come out of it stronger. So again, that's that mentorship sort of relationship. So where you get that mentorship, whether it's like Nonprofit Leadership Lab or something along those lines, or CSAP, there's so many. There's ASHA has the Leadership Development Program, which is a good mentorship program. There's the STEP. There's lots of different mentorship programs out there. You just want to make sure that you are you're intentionally surrounding yourself with people who are going to help you be introspective from the 10,000 foot view of your organization or your efforts, whatever they may be, and help you grow and do them more effectively and efficiently. And that's just going to make you feel better about what you're doing. And the better you feel about what you're doing, the more passion and excitement you bring behind it. And then it becomes contagious.
Yeah, no,
And then
I
your
agree.
friends are like, wow, look, she's so excited about doing this whole thing. I want to get part of that. I want to be part of that party. So, yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes I get that, and then I'm like, my husband's like, no, you can't do any more. Stop it. Stop saying yes.
I've been slapped on the hand. I'm not allowed to join any more boards. I'm on 3 right now. So no more nonprofit boards, no more businesses for me for right now. So
I know I accidentally submitted another proposal to ASHA when I wasn't gonna do another one last Thursday at the very last minute, and I was like, "Oh, sorry, whoops."
I did the same thing. I submitted a research project that I'm working on for the food bank.
But again, I think it just, we have this opportunity to do these things, and I think for people who are passionate about it, I agree with you on the mentorship piece, because when you have someone who's helping mentor you or being serving as a mentor, we kind of think of that as they're going to tell you what to do. And it's not always that. Sometimes it's they're cheering you on in your corner, but then sometimes you can say, hey, I had this idea. And they're like, let's talk about that. And let's like work this through. And I'm thinking this. And then it's just nice to bounce ideas off of someone that you trust, who respects you and you respect them, in a way that's not more of a tied to the traditional, I'm the teacher and you're the student, because that's really not what a mentorship role, mentee role should be. It should be more of a partnership and a shared experience. And I think that is a really, for me, that's been so helpful to have someone that I can trust to bounce an idea off of, who isn't like, your idea sucks. It's more like,
And
that's good, but what
if
about
it does
this?
suck, it's good to have someone who's honest with you to say, that's a terrible idea. But also follow that up with why. So why is it a terrible idea? Is it not implementable? Is it overreaching? Should it be part of your 10-year plan instead of your this year plan? So having someone who's I can't say it because it has a bad word, but anyways, it has the factor where they can tell you, no, that is not something you should do, is very crucial, I would say. Someone who's just brutally honest with you, that you can bounce things off, who can look at your face and go like, oh my goodness, you just lit up when you talked about that. That's definitely something you should do, versus like, you don't look very excited about that. Are you sure that's something you want to do?
Yeah, that's sucking the life out of you right now. Don't do it.
Right. So like, why are you doing that if you're not getting paid and it's sucking the life out of you? That kind of defeats the purpose. Maybe that's a sign you need to step away from whatever that is, or maybe find a different way to serve that organization if you're really passionate about the organization, but not what you're doing. There's infinite ways to advocate, and it's not one size fits all. I wouldn't tell anyone out there who's listening to go join 3 nonprofit boards. I wouldn't recommend it. That's just one of the things that I am personally like. That's what I like. I don't watch TV. I do volunteer work instead. So, yeah. But I think, getting into advocacy is a beautiful thing. It's beautiful.
I agree. And we are kind of at the end of our time together, and we don't have anything in the Q&A or the chat box. So I just want to say thank you so much, Hillary, for joining us. We always have a very productive, I feel like, conversation. You're just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the nonprofit stuff, and I learned something every time we talk about it. So I really appreciate just that background and knowledge that you shared with everybody. So, and thank you again, Hillary, for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been a blast.
If you have indicated that you are part of the ASHA registry and entered both your ASHA number and a complete address in your account profile prior to the course completion, we will submit earned CEUs to ASHA. Please allow 1 to 2 months from the completion date for your CEUs to be reflected on your ASHA transcript. Thank you for joining us at today's podcast. Remember to go to speechtherapypd.com to learn more about earning ASHA CEUs. We appreciate your positive reviews and support and would love for you to write a quick review and subscribe.